Have you ever wondered if you could play the game without actually playing it? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm answering that question anyway. There's an area of the game that isn't talked about enough: farming. There are tons of videos about how to clear the hardest stages and what cards are currently meta for the hardest stages, but sometimes there is a need to grind stages over and over again, whether they be bi-weekly stages, ultimate stages, or LR Pass stages, all of which give you diamonds and cards. So in this video, I will be going over various farming strategies. Generally, if more specific cards are required, the faster the clear time, but I'd say that the average player can make a decently fast team just with what they already have. The two main types of farming teams are semi-automatic teams and fully automatic teams. Semi-automatic means that you can do the same actions each turn, and fully automatic means that you don't have to spin at all. In the semi-automatic category, a classic example is Izanagi, the first ever semi-automatic leader. After each round, he would generate 3 heart and 3 earth at the bottom of the screen, and you can just spin randomly every round. The other type of semi-automatic leaders have conversion trails at the start of each round, where the first X number of runestones you touch will be converted into type Y. I believe the first instance of this is with Dowloth, where the first few runestones you touch are converted into light runestones, so you can just spin a horizontal line each round. Most leaders nowadays do conversion for you instead of conversion trail, since it's less of a hassle. Some notable ones that you can still use nowadays are Gintoki, the SAO family, and fittingly enough, Dowloth again, his new PR'd form recently. For the automatic category, there is technically only one card that is in this category, but it's so incredibly busted that it forms the basis of the current farming meta. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Terry. Yes, the creator of the game, Terry, has a self-insert card in the game, and it is completely broken. You can get Terry by beating the first section of the new main story, the usual and unusual. If you have already beaten it, just do the last stage in chapter 12, and it should appear in your rewards box. What separates Terry from all the other leaders is that his direct damage procs at the start of each battle without you having to do anything. Paired with his own team skill, he reduces his own CD to 0 at the start of every stage and just bulldozes through the entire stage. And honestly, that works just fine if you're dealing with your typical material stages where there are no shields and enemies have low HP. However, the main problem with the basic variation of this team was pretty apparent, which is that it was lacking in damage.
Pop it a little more!
That's where the first innovation for using this card popped up, what I'll call the guild mission variation of this kind of team. I call it that because this team was mainly used to farm guild mission stages where the enemies mostly had no shields but a relatively large HP pool. This team consisted of Chloe as the leader, Board of the Realm Cassandra plus Cianodal, Terry, and a free slot to put an optional Shieldbreaking card. Each part of the team serves a different role, which I'll just define now since it's important to understand not only for this team but also for future variations of the team. First off, there's leader Chloe. Chloe provides CD reduction through her leader skill, which reduces the CD of all cards in the team by 6. At the time, she was the only card who could do this, although there are now more cards that can do the same thing. Next is the Cassandra plus Cianodal combo, which provides Terry with damage. The way that this works is that Cassandra first reduces your attack to 0, then adds 4 times the value of the attack to your recovery. Then Cianodal reduces your recovery to 0, then adds 5 times the value of your recovery into your attack. So by activating them in that order that I just said, you effectively 20 times Terry's damage while these statuses are active. Finally, there was one member slot left over, which people didn't really use since there was no shields in the stages. Non-raid cards did have shields, but non-raid cards gave you less points, so that didn't really come into play. The ally was also rather useless since it didn't contribute to the team at all in this variation. This variation was very useful for guild mission stages, but once again couldn't really be used for very many stages outside of that, due to the fact that only 2 slots were open to be used for shield breaking purposes, and that you were screwed if you actually had to spin for a round because you would lose Cianodal's status effect. Regardless, I did experiment with different setups during this time, and no new cards that came out really helped this kind of team along until March of 2023. At the end of March 2023, the Egyptian gods got an SR, which nobody cared about initially since the Egyptians used to be a very gimmicky kind of leader that depended on very specific team comps to work, and everyone thought that they wouldn't be meta, me included. As a result, I didn't look too closely at the leader skill until someone put up a video farming the next guild mission with Karū as a leader, Ra as an ally, and Terry as a member. Turns out, the Egyptian became a very gimmicky kind of leader that depended on very specific team comps to work. The multiplier is quite large, giving light members direct damage times 35, an even bigger boost than the previous combo which gave times 20, and it only took up one card slot, bringing up another member slot. And while this doesn't seem like a big deal, it offered much more flexibility in terms of shield breaking, and so I started messing around with different team comps, and that's where I truly realized the potential that Terry had. Keeping a similar team structure, there are so many more choices nowadays for the cards that can be used around Terry. For the CD reduction leader, you can choose from Karū, Caesar, Snow, or the newest edition that actually came out while I was making the script, Azathoth. These cards' leader skill can reduce the team's CD upon entry, making it so that you can enter the stage and immediately start blasting.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
Out of all these cards, Karū is the most easily obtainable, costing 100 diamonds in the Voyager's Recollection seal. At the other end of the team is your ally. You don't need to own this card, which is a big plus. If you are using Terry, this card will most likely be Ra, however you do occasionally use a different ally such as Tefnut if you're primarily using Card Titan, or even some other cards with similar damage boosting leader skills and different shield breaking actives. The only other card that works semi-decently is Sinon, although there might be other future cards that can also fulfill a similar role. Leaders such as Montana or Fanoa, who didn't exist at the time I was initially recording. In the damage dealer role, you will typically have Terry, although other cards can replace or supplement him in the damage dealer role, and here we really do get into the super specific territory of cards. There are only a handful of constant direct damage cannons that have ever been released other than Terry, which are Cart Titan from Attack on Titan, Godzilla from Godzilla, and Summer V123, which is the OC version of Godzilla. Out of all these alternatives, Cart Titan is the most useful, and hopefully the one you're most likely to have as well due to it being the most recent. This is because it already has a base damage of 20 million and does actually benefit from the 3.5 times boost no matter the attribute of the Egyptian god, bringing it up to 70 million. Cart Titan gets around the problem of stat clears and can also help clean up multiple HP bars, solving two of the weaknesses that Terry has, so I will replace or supplement Terry with this card if the stage calls for it. Some other cards that can also supplement this are cards that can activate their damage cannons multiple times, such as Una or Montana. Next up are arguably the most important cards, shield breaking cards. Normally, when you bring shield breaking cards, you're using them as the shield appears and when you need it. However, with this kind of team comp, we're flipping the game on its head and aiming to break all the shields in the entire stage in advance, finishing the stage in as few rounds as possible. To do this, you need cards that can ignore shields globally instead of ignoring shields locally. So let's get into that. Most shield breakers in this game ignore shields locally, which means that upon skill activation, it allows their own damage to ignore shields. This is not what we want, since the damage source will be coming from Terry and friends. So you want to be looking for skills that say damage will be dealt regardless of XYZ, since this will apply to all damage, including direct damage, or cards that give the shield breaking effect to other cards in some manner if they don't have that specific description. This is where the niche part comes in to test your inventory, since global shield breakers are relatively rarer as compared to local shield breakers, and you will also want one that has a CD of 6 or below, although this can be stretched a little bit with something like Azathoth or various Dragonwares that reduce your CD. If you've made it this far, I'd like to shamelessly beg for your watch time, since YouTube also has a watch time requirement along with subscriptions in order for monetization. So if you could put on some of my longer videos in the background or something, I would really appreciate it. Okay, back to the video. Quickly going over some of the shields and shield breakers right now. The most basic enemy shields are Enchanted Runestone Shield and Defense, but Terry as well as most damage cannons innately ignore that, so you don't have to worry about it. Another important note is that there are also some shields that direct damage just completely bypasses, such as Initial Dissolve, Red-Green Portals, Combo Seal and Runestone Calm Nullifying, Anti-Runestone Shield, etc., as well as Burning, Sticky, Tornado, Laser Trap, and Electrified, Petrified, Weathered, Frozen, and Weakened Runestones, and many more. These are all shields that have to do with spinning, and when you're farming, ideally you don't do any spinning, and so you can just ignore this most of the time. The second most basic enemy shield is Combo Shield, and there's no way to counter it.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, that's a bit misleading. I should say that there is no card in the game that specifically ignores this shield because the developers didn't foresee someone like me trying to bypass the main mechanic of the game for some reason. As far as I know, there are only 2 ways to break this shield without spinning. The first is cards that deal direct damage and ignore any shield in the game. Some of these are absolute godsends and some of these are absolute garbage. The other way is slightly complicated, so bear with me here. Firstly, have a card that adds combos as well as another card that deals damage after spinning. By using both their actives and doing an empty spin, you can get the damage to go through even if you don't dissolve anything, but it still uses up a round. The way that I'm guessing how this works is that the shield checks for the number of combos when damage is being dealt, and combos only accumulate after spinning, so normal direct damage will not go through, while something that does damage after spinning will go through. With that overly long explanation out of the way, let's talk about some other common shields. The 4 most common shields, apart from the 2 I just talked about, are Puzzle Shield, Initial Shield, Elemental Shields, and Fixed Combo Shield. For Puzzle Shield, the main choices are Pompeii, Mana, Penglai because they ignore more than one shield, with other cards having limitations on the cards that they give ignoring to. Same thing with Initial Shield, although there are more cards that can globally ignore this shield, with the main choices being Pompeii again, Dagda, the Black Gold Daji, and Dark Metazord. For the elemental shields of varying types, the main choices are Aria, the dark card from Gintama, Fushiguro, and Lindayu. You get some more choices if you relax the conditions to ignoring Trio and Quinta Elemental, but these are more universal. For a fixed combo shield, this is usually taken care of by the ally Egyptian, but if you aren't using them as an ally, Lilith and Xiangyu are good choices. There are more cards ignoring other shields that I'll briefly show on screen, but these are more niche and will come up less often, and there also aren't that many cards that can globally ignore these shields. And there you have it. There are quite a lot of possible setups, but once again, you don't need every single card that I've shown in order to be able to construct a farming team. It's just that some specific cards can enable more strategies to be used. I'm also thinking of releasing a sequence of videos farming various stages in the LR Pass for you to copy or to build your own teams that surpass my times. So let me know if you want that in the comments below. If you've reached this point in the video, thank you so much, and I would really appreciate any likes, comments, and subscriptions if you've made it this far in order to support the channel. Hopefully this gives you a better idea on how farming teams work, and I'll get less dislikes on my speedrunning videos. Happy farming!